these kinds of technologies. So in a sense, it's a simulation, but we are in fact going to be talking to a number of real civil society organizations both in the Caribbean and in Canada that have volunteered to participate. And we're going to be exploring ideas around how to facilitate engagement with citizenry using these kinds of interactive tools. So, are we live?
We are live now.
Oh, we're live?
We are live, yes.
Okay.
So this session is live now. If you actually went to the ParlAmericas Facebook page, you would see Mr. Maurice right now.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Well, if that is the case, let me welcome online a number of our colleagues from the Caribbean and Canada. So there is Citizens for a Better Bahamas from the Bahamas. There is Transparency Institute Guyana Inc., of course from Guyana. There is Open North from Canada. There is Apathy is Boring from Canada. And there is Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute. And I believe we also have that from Latin America?
From all over Latin America.
Okay, from all over Latin America. So, welcome to you all, and again, thank you for participating in this session. I think the number of questions that we framed to facilitate this session, and the first question was, what actions should Parliament take to increase citizen trust and engagement? Okay, so the first, so everyone clear on that first question. This was posed to each of the entities. So Open North's response to that, the issue of proximity is something that is often brought up in Canada as yes, thank you. Okay, so I'm reading their comment through Facebook Live. So, constituents don't always feel that they can readily access their member of parliament, and that plays a lot on their level of trust, their ability to access. The issue of transparency is inherently related to the level of trust citizens will have in their elected officials. In this sense, the internet offers some interesting opportunities for MPs to engage directly. So that's a comment from Open North in Canada. And from Citizen for Bahamas, MPs should constantly keep citizens informed of the work that they're doing. They should also promote citizen engagement overall and provide a means for citizens to have greater input in national policies. So those are the
Yes.
So those are the two comments to that issue. Okay. So, and again, remember you're on Green Street Live, right? So I will open it to parliamentarians to respond on any of those comments or any other aspect of this question about mechanisms for engagement.
A very successful mechanism we've used in the Grenada Parliament, let me just switch glasses, is the focus we place on two things. One, we've analyzed quite a while ago that the removal of civics, and in fact we've seen the effects of this in the most recent constitutional referendum we had in Grenada. The removal of civics from the curriculum has led to a marked decrease in the citizens' knowledge, and especially younger citizens. So what we have done is we have a program in which we get the Form 4s and Form 5s on a rotation basis in the schools to come to Parliament during its sitting from time to time, particularly when there are major parliamentary debates, like the upcoming debate on the appropriation bills and so on, the budget, and on other matters, the debate on the bills for the referendum and all of that. And what is very interesting is in the interviews that are done by the media of those students who participate is the wide array of positive feedback we get. First of all, they didn't realize that Parliament was so important. They didn't realize that Parliament touched such an wide array of issues. They didn't realize that Parliament dealt with issues, even issues that they're concerned with, things like scholarship, educational opportunities, etc., etc., etc. So that's one mechanism. The second mechanism is the mock parliaments that we have conducted over periodically. That particular program has fallen down because of the cost involved, but it is something we certainly think that, I certainly think that we should revive it. That's the mock parliament. And we would normally set to have one at each once a year, where we find a number of topic items and the students coming and they research how to prepare a bill, and then the bill comes to Parliament. They actually are given the parliamentary chamber for that day, and they come and debate openly. It's televised, so they got an opportunity together with their friends, both to witness it live as well as to be glued to the television to look at these things rather than to be looking at something else. Now that's an investment for the Parliament in the future, because these young people would be voting citizens, they would be themselves parliamentarians. So I just thought that I would share that experience as one of the ways of bringing Parliament closer to the citizens.
Okay, thank you very much, member. Any other comments on the issue of trust and how to better engender trust with citizens?
I think one of the issues that we've been having in the Bahamas is that the citizens don't feel connected to the process. I think that they feel as though decisions are being made, legislation is being imposed, and it's kind of just an afterthought as to how the public is going to respond and how this is going to affect individuals. I think that there needs to be a greater level of engagement in the drafting process. Now, of course, there are a lot of instances where there are opportunities for public engagement, whether that is in the form of town meetings, whether it's through websites that encourage commentary. But what we're finding is those mediums aren't really reaching people. People aren't attending the public meetings, they're not coming to those kinds of forums, and so now it's incumbent upon parliaments to become more creative as to how we engage the public, because you may set a forum, but if they haven't attended, they won't say, a forum was set, I chose not to attend. They're going to say the government didn't do anything to engage us, to advise us, to make this information more accessible to us. So now the complexity of trying to excite people again about the legislative process, get them more involved. I think that one of the challenges that we're having in our country, the Bahamas, is this lack of trust with government, but it's also this apathy toward government. One of the things we're looking at now is this low percentage of registered voters that we have with an election in less than 6 months. The percentage of persons who have registered at this time for this upcoming election is much lower than it was in our previous election around the same time. So obviously there are challenges that need to be worked out, and we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So we need to diversify our approach to the dissemination of information, to engaging the public, and we need to have a diversity of ways that we do that. Because what may appeal to a more settled senior individual may be a town meeting, may be one-on-one dialogue. What may appeal to a younger audience may be a discussion through Facebook Live, through social media outlets. So I think it's diversifying how information is disseminated, how the public is engaged, and not choosing one forum over the other, but rather trying to present in a multiplicity of forums, and I think that would be helpful.
Okay, excellent. So, and we're still talking about the issue of trust, and it seems from your responses to keep coming back to the notion of greater engagement with citizenry. As a member, want to make a contribution?
Okay, on the issue of trust as well, I think that one of the things that people get disillusioned by is timelines and not meeting timelines. And something that parliamentarians tend to do often, you get excited about a new project or being able to do something for persons within your community, and you may give an unrealistic timeline, and then you're not able to fulfill the goal within that period. So, and the world is more instantaneous. Everybody wants their problem to be solved now. So, by utilizing all of those things, you need to get person involved from an early stage in the decision-making process. Through town hall meetings, you discuss the issues and let them put forward some of the solutions as well. But you also have to keep them engaged and be realistic and upfront with them and say, well, we may not be able to do this by a certain time, or there are certain economic constraints which we may face, and get them involved in that process as well, so that everybody would be on the same page. Because when you have a breakdown in trust happening, you said you will do this, but then you don't deliver. But if something goes beyond your ability to deliver, because in most cases, we develop a policy, but the other persons who are responsible for the implementation. And that is something that needs to be brought home to everyone, and where civics comes in terms of teaching civics within school. The parliamentarian is there to develop the policy, but you have other persons who actually execute and bring it to reality. So you need to get those players involved as well in terms of being a part of that discussion and the communication process.
Excellent. A couple of quick questions rolling in on the same matter of trust. So, first of all, from apathy is boring, how do you ensure the ongoing communication and engagement with youth? Clearly the notion here is that a significant part of this trust deficit is with the young people, or perhaps disaffection. So how do you engage that ongoing engagement with youth? And also from Open North, do members feel like the media has a negative impact on citizens' trust, or that it hinders the interactions between citizens and parliamentarians? Those are two questions that have come in. Any members want to tackle any of those?
Thank you. I want to tackle the issue on youth. In reading the International Parliamentary Union report for 2016, they indicated that while parliaments globally have been doing a fairly good job in pushing information out into the public domain, the engagement is still very, very weak in terms of getting the citizenry to engage parliament. One of the things that I know my team in Trinidad will look at is how do we engage youth conversation? How do we let that push of information be content that the younger population would want to engage you at a parliamentary level? That's one thing. The other thing that ties in back to trust and youth is that you have the stalwarts in the politics normally when you have a party politics system. Either way, they swing to their politics of history. But the young people are the ones who are saying, hey guys, hold on there. We're not swinging based on history. I want to hear what you have to deliver. And if we are not speaking their language and speaking something relevant, the content is not relevant to them, then hey, what you're telling me, so it brings the issue of trust. And colleague from Bahamas was speaking earlier on this morning, and I was telling her perhaps the language our young people understand is through poetry, through song, through the spoken word. What if we allow them to engage parliamentarians in poetry, in song, in the spoken word, and you engage them now in the medium that they are familiar with, and then we build that trust as we go forward. So that's an opportunity, I think, that we can engage our young people to deal with the issue of trust.
Yeah, thank you. In the Senate of Canada, we've had a very recent example of trust between senators and the public, and we've had some expense issues in the past year, and then recently we had some more disclosure, and the media headline was booze, gifts, and hospitality and art exhibits. And it's the way the headline was, and most people just read the headline, they don't read the whole article. And that's the challenge. The way the headline is written is very different from the meat of the article. Meat of the article really did not speak about any. There was a booze article. One senator had bought a bottle of alcohol or some alcohol for $50, which he had 25 people in his office, constituents that he entertained, which is perfectly legitimate. But the way the headline read, and if a person just reads the headline, it gives the impression that the Senate is spending all this money on booze. So the media has a lot in its power. It has a lot of control in its hands, and I believe many times the way it just writes its headline, it does disservice, and it also breaks the trust between the citizen and the politician.
Can I just ask a question? Is the issue one for young people? I could understand mature persons, but for young people, you think the issue in respect of Parliament is a question of trust?
Perhaps. I don't know, I've used the term trust and disaffection interchangeably. There's clearly a level of disaffection and disengagement.
But even if it is it an issue of disaffection as such? Or is it what we are seeing is really disinterest. I have looked at the phenomenon for some time, and I was wondering how we can utilize it. If there's an announcement in Grenada that a gentleman by the name of Buju Banton, or whatever he calls himself, is coming from Jamaica, you can't find a venue that can hold people. You can't find a venue that can hold people. In other words, what is there in that turns on people, especially young people, especially youth? What is it that these people are able to do to unlock and turn up the interest? And to what extent we can feed into that or use the same mechanism? And I'm saying, the trust issue, well, I got to be careful here. A lot, for example, of the evangelicals, and there's so many church units are packed. And at the same time, there's so many issues which revolve even around trust with a lot of the scandals. Yet these enterprises are packed with people. So if fundamentally the issue of trust is the one that discourages people engagement with Parliament, then what is the answer that we've seen in this phenomenon? I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just throwing it out as part of the discussion because I'm not too sure that we are actually framing the question right. And if you don't frame the question right, then the answers that you would get may not necessarily help you in resolving the matter. But I just throw it out to, give thought to it. I don't have the answers myself.
Okay, interesting comment. I don't know if other members have a point of view on that, but perhaps there are a few more comments coming in. This perhaps from Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute. The approach to communicating with different constituents is important. So in a sense, you have to tailor both the medium and the message for the constituent. How can people interrogate the veracity of the information presented? So it's not a one-way dialogue. We facilitate the ability for the audience to interrogate the veracity of the message presented, and there are appropriate channels for that. I don't want to tackle that, but still, it's actually a tough one. But it's really exploring the notion of A, tailoring the message for the audience, both the message and the medium, and B, how do you facilitate interaction rather than just dissemination?
That's the essence of my observations. We ask them the same thing. I don't know, I don't have a response.
Sorry.
In terms of the question with the getting an opportunity to comment and not just for you to to comment, because in many Caribbean jurisdictions, there is a forum that works well for that. Many of us have radio programs on a daily basis where people go on and vigorously debate any policy or any decision which is made in government. And I find that that works well within the Caribbean setting, and many parliamentarians do listen to it or pay attention, and you get a sense of how people feel about a particular policy or a particular piece of legislation. What we need to do more of is that we need to, before we lay the legislation in Parliament for debate as a done deal in terms of it having been drafted, we need to go back to the stage where we put out the papers and give persons the opportunity to comment on it and say how they feel about it before we actually draft the legislation. So that, and also open up to committees and have open committees where persons can actually from certain sectors can actually come in and give their view on how it can affect them and what they would like to see in the legislation before it is actually drafted, and have the drafters present as well, so that they will draft a piece of legislation that is inclusive of all of the views of the representative of all of the views of persons who would be involved. I want to add, though, in terms of engaging the youth, it must be said that the youth sometimes need to, because there's not a single parliamentarian who does not want to engage the youth. And you do have a number of forums, as was mentioned, I believe, by the representative from Trinidad. You do have a number of forums, and also from the representative from Grenada, but no one turns up. So young people also have to put themselves in a position where they are there when the decisions are being made. So you have to make yourself accessible and available. It's a journey that we have to take together. We have to try to bridge the gap in terms of social media, that forums where young people would be, so that they can actively participate. But at the same time, young people also have to walk halfway and meet you there as well, in terms of making themselves available so that they can also give an input as well. I don't think there's any parliamentarian or any parliament in the world that does not want to hear the views of the youth and young people.
All right, so a couple of questions rolling in here. Actually, things are clicking online, colleagues. From Argentina, I would like to know the systems employed in different parliaments for online citizen participation, but perhaps more significantly, what can be done to engage more with the excluded populations, so that perhaps there's still a segment of people that we're not reaching through the mechanisms that we've been discussing. What should be done to engage those persons? I think we heard an interesting anecdote this morning about walking up to this remote village on the top of a hill and going into a classroom and engaging with citizens. So again, that's a question for members to contemplate. And from Citizens for Better Bahamas, parliamentarians should also promote citizen engagement overall and provide a means for citizens to have greater input in national policies. Parliamentarians should also meet regularly and seek input from various CSOs within their communities or constituencies. There should not be a perception of all decisions being made behind closed doors. And so the issue here is not just about disseminating information, but more participatory engagement of citizens in the decision-making process. The conversations that we may have later about the budget cycle is one such area of potential engagement. So I throw those two comments out for members to consider.
Okay, in terms of the first question concerning participatory opportunities for the citizenry, in the current system, the government decides the legislative agenda. So, for instance, in Trinidad, there is a hot topic of child marriages. Now, that is not key on the agenda as yet, but there should be some mechanism where the citizenry can make a petition that this be included in the shortest time frame on the parliamentary agenda for debate. So, by allowing the citizens to be more participatory, it's going to build confidence in the system, and it comes back to the issue of trust. Confidence will bring trust. If we give citizens the ability, by some mechanism, I know in the British Parliament, through the e-petitions, if they trigger 100,000 votes on a particular topic, a backbench of Parliament decides whether it comes for debate in the Parliament. So, to answer the engagement part, we ought to find a way to get the citizen to decide what is important to them, and that we as parliamentarians should debate it in the Parliament of the country.
Other comments?
Thank you. The engagement with youth are engaged. Youth are care about the environment, care about social justice. They want to be involved, but parliaments have traditionally not engaged the youth to participate, have not consulted, and not heard their views. And that's something that we hear loud and clear. In Canada, for example, our Prime Minister is now the Minister of Youth. He's made a conscious effort of engagement on various levels. He's also set up a youth council. So there's a number of youth that have been selected through a process and now are advising our Prime Minister on issues that are foreign to Parliament. So when you look at the engagement and you open up Parliament and you have that linkage with social media, then you're getting youth engaged, because youth are not, looking at the newspaper, are not. And when we talk about youth, there's a large range of ages here. So it's really important to be relevant, and the engagement that they're doing that we haven't reached out in the past. And I think it's very important.
Okay, so please.
Maybe I can make one remarks at this point, because we are exercising more than 10 years with the youth parliament, and it's directly under the president of the country. But I don't think that helps in the 10 years, or more than 10 years, the engagement of the youth. I think we have to do more than that. That's my comment on that of Canada.
There's actually another comment here which I think is an interesting one that in some respects relates to what we just said. So from Kamala, we have been led by the media, but we have to think about how we can lead the media. I think we've seen a very good example of leading the media in recent times, right? The suggestion about tapping into the kind of media used by the youth will help, but we have to be open to two-way communication that is online, immediate, and responsive. Are we able to create an online framework that transfers across cultures and excites constituents? So in other words, can we not be bound by the traditional media and means of communications, and instead find a way that is more engaging for this new type of constituent? So that's a comment, and perhaps one that members might want to reflect on. No comments on that one?
Well, maybe if I may. I think what has happened is, my experience has been that the traditional media, I can talk about my province of British Columbia, my experience has been that the traditional media is not as much read anymore, it's more the social media. And what amazing opportunity we have now is that we can reach out to our constituents and we can set up the framework. And more importantly, the youth can set up the way they want to communicate with us, and they can push us into new ways, which may be new ways for us, but it's a direct communication, you know, just with what we saw with the Facebook, this live Facebook is where we could, we have had senators reach into the classrooms with Facebook and have that direct communication with youth. And I think what is wonderful about this new era of social media is that we have the direct communication without the lens of a person who's trying to sell newspapers. So I think we have reached a place where we can have direct communication without somebody else's lens who's got another master to please.
Thank you. It's an important point, member.
Ladies first.
I believe the point where we're at now, the youth especially, they regard communication that is taking place right now. When it comes to discussion on political issues, most young people stay away from this type of discussions because, to me, politics in our age now, I consider to be the great divider. So what happens, you find people staying away from certain discussions, and we have to find dynamic ways to engage people, whether the youth or the general citizenry of a country. But it is difficult. So we may have to start with education and tailor it so that all these different aspects that we spoke about this morning, like the social media, can be brought to bear on whatever we are doing. Because as we go along, it would be difficult, it would be very difficult for us to engage the young people because they do not want to take part in politics, especially if it's not election time, for example. So in different countries, there has to be programs tailored, okay, to reach out and engage the youth. It's not going to happen just like that. I mean, the youth can find so many other different avenues to do so many different other things, like sports, etc., etc. But when it comes to what takes place in our parliament, we have to find we have to be dynamic, we have to program, and we'll probably have to set up a totally different system so that we can engage our youth to participate.
Indeed. And I think as the member said just prior to that comment, we have to be responsive. So instead of assuming that we know what they want, being responsive to the way they articulate their needs for information and communication.
I think we have at least one other person.
Right.
I think we have.
I was going to say, like, in Dominica, for example, we have a lot of forums where we engage young people, and we have a lot of programs designed to help them to advance themselves, to start businesses. We have the Dominica Youth Business Trust, and other avenues where young people can get opportunities for education and to start small businesses. What I've noticed, though, in talking to a lot of young people, is that, and I think that's why this training session is important, is how we get information across to them. And the traditional ways will not work because they don't read newspapers and they don't listen to the radio as often. So what I think we need to do more as parliamentarians is use social media to speak more about the programs we have for them and to engage them and have open discussions so they can comment. Because sometimes you call town hall meetings and you call youth meetings and they don't show up. For example, we are developing our youth policy in Dominica, and we had town hall meetings in almost all hamlets, and very few young people showed up to give their contributions. And I asked them why, and they said, oh, they were busy, and that's where the comment on disinterest comes in. You have to get them interested in their future. Because some of them, they have a perspective on politics that it is divisive, so they're not interested. So you have to allow them now to speak more on social media behind the scenes. They don't want to be up front in town hall meetings and come on the mic and speak openly. That is for the youth in Dominica. I don't know about the other islands. But if you had an open discussion on social media or on Facebook, and you ask them what you thought about the youth policy and what you would like to see, you get many comments. So it's just how we engage them and get them involved in certain things happening in Parliament and about different policies that are going to affect their life in the future. So I think that is how we'll get them engaged. And another thing I've noticed is that when I was growing up, we had a lot of different social issues confronting us. For example, you had only 100 persons attending college in Dominica. Now anyone can attend college. So, you know, the causes are different. And so because life has become better for the youth now, sometimes they don't understand the challenges we had and where we're coming from. So we have to tend to focus our conversations on what's important to them and help them to understand the needs of the future. And so prepare them to empower them so they can be prepared to grasp the future.
I would also like to make my contribution in regards to how can we make the youths be part of us when it comes to the political scenario. I was sitting right here and I was listening to all of our honorable colleagues. Many things ran to my mind. And I know in Belize, of course, we're getting youths involved in all of the things that we do at the parliamentarian levels. And I always have a belief which goes, if the youths fail to take up what they need to do today, the country will fail eventually. Because the youths are founders, are the foundation. Our days are coming to an end, if I would say it like that. The youths are starting. So, one of the things we are doing in Belize as parliamentarians, we are doing a youth development program, like what the honorable colleague talked about from Dominica. We are also involving technical vocational studies for youths at secondary and tertiary level, which we see that is working. The sporting activities for youths is also one of the things that we are doing. It is being now under under our government in Belize, that we are doing many of these investment in youths and sports compared to the previous days when youths were only left to hang out on the street. We're also looking at involvement of youths at the university when it comes to forum. We need to educate them about it because many of our youths today may aspire to be just like us too. They want to be members of parliaments after these. So all of these things, and we will look at it. I put a comment on social media earlier, which I said I'm in Mexico attending a workshop, and I would want the involvement of my youths like me in Belize, and I'm personally very surprised to get almost about 800 comments already on social media. So you see how effective it is to have the involvement of youth, and they are expressing just exactly what this is that they want to say. And they remember that our youths they have the freedom of speech, so they must say what they feel within the inside. And it's up to us as parliamentarians to either take it or to leave it alone. And also we are doing at the Ministry of Education in Belize, we are also providing scholarship to them. For example, like CSEC Award, we provide CXC scholarship. We are even in the southern part where my constituency is, in the Stamford and Interior District as well. We are providing secondary school first and second farmers a free subsidy under this government, and we believe that with the importance of youths, we are building the youths today for a better tomorrow of the Belize. Thank you.
Okay, just to shift a little bit, there's one interesting question here from Guatemala. What information, if any, would parliamentary members like to have from citizens? That's an interesting question. Mainly thinking about it a little bit, but in essence, it's saying, as we talk about the central theme of engagement, what would you like from us as the citizens? I think that's the essential essence of that question.
I think one of the most significant things in the engagement is that the efforts of parliamentarians, the efforts to engage the public are met with positive response. That's the thing, because if you put together all of the programs, all of the forums, all of the mechanisms, and no one responds, then they're of no effect. And so I think that what we want from the public is just for them to respond and be present in the conversation. Because I find that if it's negative, the responses can go on for days. But when you're asking people to think critically, to analyze, to discuss the issues, that is a more difficult fight. And so what we want from the public, what we want from citizens, is to engage on a deeper and more meaningful level in conversations that actually impact the future of individuals and the future of our country, and not simply just, disseminating little sound bites, little witty comments, things that are a bit pedestrian, if I can use that term. And they don't really get to the heart of the matter. I think we need the response of citizens in that they dare to invest a little bit of time into what is important to them, into what is important in each country. A lot of people are, and this may go from government to also the citizenry, we can be a little lazy in how much time, how much effort, how much work we're willing to put in to getting some result. And so governments have a responsibility to engage, and I hope that citizens also feel responsible to participate, and to participate in a meaningful way. Because participation isn't simply dismissing the efforts of a government, but it's really engaging. There's no point in critique if there's no alternative suggestion. And so that's really what I think that we would want to see from the public.
Other comments? Well said, member. I think we have maybe just short of 5 minutes left. Perhaps we'll just, there's one last question that we had posed to the participating organizations. What would you like to know about parliamentarians' work on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? Again, this goes to the issue of not only engagement, but understanding Parliament more. It's more than just a black box. What goes on inside there? What would you, the citizen, like to know from us, your members, about what we do on a daily basis? And there's one comment from Citizens for Better Bahamas. A, the amount of time per week spent reviewing proposed legislation. B, what, if any, support resources are available for legislative review and formulation of positions. C, the frequency of constituency forums or meetings. And D, the frequency of meetings with subject matter experts or CSO groups to determine policy insight. So in a sense, I'm trying to find out how does Parliament work, what are the things that happen, how is time allocated, and how much time is allocated for us to be a part of that process. Interesting response. Any comments from members? Okay. Well, I think it's been quite fascinating. It's the first, I don't know, has anyone else engaged in this kind of online forum?
I just want to say that When we had our Environmental Management Protection Act in Antigua, we had an open consultation which was open to the public, and everyone was invited, CSOs, NGOs, and we find that people with specialised knowledge came and they were able to have an input into the legislation, and all their comments were taken on board. I also want to say generally that I agree with the Honourable Senator from Barbados when he's saying that politicians always want the public to be involved, and they have to meet us halfway. I found a lot of apathy when you explain things to people. They say, oh, you're the politician, or you're the lawyer, you're the this, and you have to literally beg them to become involved. You'll always have what I call the activists, persons who are always on the other side, and no matter what you do, they always have a comment, be it negative. It's always like to try and drop you in a hole. So I think it's very important that the public should be engaged, but they have to have an interest as well, because you just cannot force people to be interested. As politicians, we go out, we walk the streets, we talk to them, we try and tell them this, you tell them that, and sometimes you can even feel they're really not that interested. And I just want to refer to a comment the Honourable Senator from Grenada made. He said, if Buju Banton's coming, everybody wants to know. Where's he coming? How much? They ask you all the questions possible. And I don't know how we get that level of interest for them in politics. My last comment is this issue of trust. I always grew up hearing that politics was dirty business. So if that's the premise you start from, it's hard to build trust. When I got involved, people saying, oh, why would you do that? Why would you get involved with them people? So I think people generally believe that politicians never tell you the truth. So even when you are telling them the truth, I think there's a block somewhere there that they half listen. And sometimes when you're on the campaign trail, you do make promises. You do intend to keep them. And then sometimes when you get into power, there are all sorts of different things that may come up which have a high priority. So it's not that you don't intend to keep this promise, it's just that other things have become a higher priority. And it's very hard for people to understand that, because they say, you said you were going to, and you haven't done it. So I think it's a joint effort that everyone has to make. It just cannot be the politicians alone. People have to show an interest in what's happening in their community. Thank you.
I think, just to piggyback on the last comments, see, if you have to use music, to get the message across to the young people, so be it. And because we say we need to program, we need to know how to get to them. And that's the missing link. Sometimes it's very difficult. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I think I'm getting the wrap up. Okay, one more comment.
Garrett Ferguson, and I'll probably be I am the only non-member of Parliament. On the issue of trust, coming from a couple other conferences that I've been to, not only came from the Parliament or the members trying to do it. A lot of it came from the NGOs and the NPOs, the non-profit organizations getting involved. The thing with what we found with parliaments and parliamentary language, it's more structured in a sort of legal framework that the average citizen doesn't, that the average citizen will be able to condense. And what these organizations and these civil societies and NPOs, NGOs was supposed to do and are doing in various jurisdictions is take that information and then redefine, not really redefine it, but reparcel it in a way that the average man could see it. Because when you look at how a law is crafted, or how what we call the bill form in a piece of legislation, the average person would not be able to condense that. They would not be able to begin to read that. But if you take it and you distill it into something that the person can see, understand what each clause of a law is, it's easier for them to then understand that and engage the person on that level and have them comment on those form, on that language structure, than having that form as it is. One other point, one of the ways that we try to engage the trust of the citizens is that we started to do more public hearings. So we have a lot more committees that are and public hearings where we call them hearings now, where we actually bring in ministries or public companies and public utility companies, and they are questioned, and also even the members questioned. They are questioned now, and they're questioned in a public environment. And because we stream live, we put all of these things out live, and we take the questions that come off of social media, from off of Twitter, from Facebook, from YouTube, and we actually have the secretaries that are sitting in those committees and in those hearings actually give the chairman those comments and those questions. So those are actually put in there, and we actually have the citizens engage on those levels. So some of the things is that we need to then just make it more available, that the citizens can actually see what's going on and participate. And I think that is one of the ways in which we can possibly build that trust.
Okay, thank you. Well,
one more comment.
Sorry.
I like your comment, Senator Ferguson. But one of the things we need to address is how does trust get broken? And one of the ways trust gets broken most times is by the media. Because they take a soundbite and they back up in research and they blow it up, and it is shared and people hear it and they tend to believe it without asking questions. That's what happened. And so in part of the process of trust and building trust with the constituents and parliamentarians, it is also a call for responsible media and accountable media.
Okay, thank you, Minister. And on that note, I believe we have to bring this really interesting exercise as a kind of demonstration and illustration of what's possible. I think the last few contributions suggested that conversations have to be both ways, that we have to be creative in the type of medium and the type of messaging that we use. But it is clear that the kinds of technologies and ICTs that are available through social media and other kinds of media, some of the interesting things you guys are doing in Trinidad, create the opportunity for that new and different kind of messaging for different constituents. And so we have to look at every opportunity to leverage those for greater and more impactful engagement. Well, let me thank our colleagues out there in the ether for